What's going on, everyone? So the Green Bay Packers just made their undrafted free agent signings official, meaning that the Green Bay Packers roster is now officially at 90 total players. So I wanted to make an initial depth chart prediction, kind of how it sits right now, where players are at on the depth chart, including rookies, undrafted free agents, street free agents, every player from the 90-man roster. I'm going to predict a very early depth chart for the Green Bay Packers. I want to make a video after every, say, level of the offseason, whether that's OTAs, training camp, all sorts of different things this offseason. I want to make a depth chart. So then we can really track the risers and fallers who started maybe high on the depth chart, then lowered, and vice versa, who started low and then keeps rising up the depth chart, kind of like a Carrington Valentine last year, right? So I wanted to make my early prediction and just also kind of showcase the outlook of the Packers roster right now at 90 players. They have the rookie minicamp with tryout players coming up, so that could honestly change a couple things, but not too much. And then the first portion of OTAs as well coming up. If you want more Packers news, analysis, and updates, you'll find it all here right on this channel. I post Packers content pretty much every day of the week. If that does interest you in terms of, roster outlook, salary cap, roster news, player breakdowns, I can't wait to dive down into all these rookies and go over the film and really just showcase the type of players the Packers got. So if all of that interests you and you aren't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you went down and clicked subscribe. It supports the channel. It's free to do. Thank you guys so much. All right, so let's just dive right into it, and I'll bring up the screen, and we're going to start on offense. And again, this is my predictive depth chart as of right now. This is not the Packers official depth chart. That's not going to be out for a while. And this is going to include, like I said, all 90 players. It's not going to include the tryout players because they're not signed by the Packers yet, so I'm not going to project them into a depth chart. And as for the key, the color key at least here, blue equals a rookie from this season, orange equals an undrafted free agent from this season, and green equals a street free agent from this season, such as Josh Jacobs and Andre Dillard that they signed this offseason. All right, so let's dive right into it, and we'll start at quarterback. This is an easy one, obviously. Jordan Love at number 1. I have Sean Clifford at number 2. I know some people, and I've seen it going around with some 53-man roster predictions and depth chart predictions, Michael Pratt at number 2. I think it's Sean Clifford's job to lose. They spent a higher draft pick on him last year. I thought he had a nice season of progression, right? Not that he played much, but from what I saw in last year's training camp and whatnot, and the very limited snaps we saw, I think it's his job to lose. Michael Pratt's a 7th-round pick. He very well could be cut at the end of training camp and re-signed to the practice squad. I doubt another team would sign him if the Packers are willing to cut him. That means that he didn't showcase a whole ton and they can bring him back on the practice squad. But honestly, I think the Packers probably go into the season with 3 quarterbacks, and that would be Love, Clifford at number 2, and Michael Pratt at number 3. I like the upside of Pratt. I do believe he will showcase that this offseason. Then I have Alex Magoo at 4th, just a camp body at this point, a guy that likely will be cut by training camp or slightly thereafter, and maybe comes back on the practice squad, but the Packers will already have 3 quarterbacks at that point, so it's probably not going to happen. Moving to running back, we start with Josh Jacobs at number 1, their biggest offensive signing in free agency this year, an hour before they cut Aaron Jones, so there was a brief period where we're like, oh, wow, we have the best backfield in the NFL. We have Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, and what's that going to look like? And that was very short-lived. The Packers cutting Aaron Jones shortly thereafter. I have Marshawn Lloyd at number 2. And again, this is slightly predictive, but also the way as it sits right now. So you could argue the way that it sits right now, A.J. Dillon is number 2. I completely understand that argument, and I probably would agree. But this is a blend of how it sits and what I predict the depth chart to eventually look like, so then we can come back and compare it. In the 3rd, I have A.J. Dillon. There's no risk under his contract, so the Packers very well could cut him if they don't like what they see and they love Marshawn Lloyd and they're comfortable and they say, hey, he's our number 2. They could just let A.J. Dillon walk. But for how cheap it is, it probably just makes sense to keep him on the roster anyways, no matter what. But that could be at 3rd running back or another spot, which I'll go over here next. Then we have Emmanuel Wilson at 4th, was the 3rd running back before the Lloyd pick. Ellis Merriweather at 5th, and Jarvian Howard, one of their undrafted free agents, at 6th. Most of the time, undrafted free agents, they're going to start at the back of the depth chart. Very rarely are they going to be in the 2nd string or anything of that sort. So Howard at 6th here. Then moving to H-back or fullback or the DeGuara role, which we can't even call it that anymore. Like, he didn't even do that role well, and he barely was on the field. So we're just gonna call it H-back from now on. We're not going to call it the DeGuara role, right? Henry Pearson in the 1st. He's listed as the only fullback on the roster, which is an H-back. So I have him at 1st. And I was mentioning another spot for A.J. Dillon, maybe at H-back. I saw some comments about it in my live stream. I started to see it on Twitter today, arguing that A.J. Dillon maybe could be an H-back for the Green Bay Packers. And there's two sides of the argument, right? A.J. Dillon has the size, he has the speed. They could use him in the receiving game as H-back. It would be a great mismatch, right? But then the other argument is, can he really play fullback? Can he really get to the next level and make blocks at a consistent level? I saw one of the arguments against it saying the Packers already tried this. They tried the pony package early last year a lot. The Packers are running the pony package a lot, where they have both Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon on the field, kind of in that shotgun look, and it didn't work. A.J. Dillon didn't do a great job at lead blocking, and it just simply didn't work. But if he goes through the offseason with that in mind, like, hey, your spot on this roster could be at H-back starting, and you could be on the field a lot more than, say, a third running back, he might be fully for that. You know, he already signed this very cheap deal that rarely gets signed. I didn't even hear about the type of contract he had until he signed it. It was a very weird one with no risk, and he wanted to remain in Green Bay. So I think he'll do just about anything. And I think he's even said before, like, I'll even play, you know, whatever, long snapper if it means staying in Green Bay. So if the Packers want to put him there, I think he's 100% going to do it. And he's 100% going to try to do the best at it. It's very intriguing. It's an interesting thought. So maybe it happens. Then I have Messiah Swinson at third, another undrafted free agent they signed. Probably projects as an H-back type of tight end, more of a blocking guy. Plus, they just assigned him a number in the 40s. So yeah, he's going to be an H-back on the depth chart. Then we have tight ends. We have the Y tight end, or the inline tight end, and also the F tight end, or the move guy. You can put him out wide. You can put him in the slot, move him around, motion him around. That's Luke Musgrave at the F tight end, Tucker Kraft at number 1 Y tight end. So 12 personnel out there. You got Kraft and Musgrave both out there first. And then we have Ben Sims at the backup inline tight end. That much is obvious. The Packers used him a decent bit last year, inline tight end. Then the backup F, I have Tyler Davis, but he can kind of play both spots, obviously coming off that torn ACL, but the Packers still really like him. Then we have Joel Wilson at third at the F tight end, or Y, it really doesn't matter. Then for wide receivers, I have it separated into X wide receiver, Z wide receiver, and slot wide receiver. Now, these are all interchangeable for the Green Bay Packers. Like one play, Christian Watson's the Z, then he's the X, then he's the slot after that. So it's not locked in. It's not like, oh, Christian Watson's the Z, he's got to be on the line of scrimmage, and that's what he is. No, that's not the case. The Packers move wide receivers around a lot. All of these guys play all of these roles pretty much. So just as it stands, the basis, I have Romeo Doubs at the starting X, Christian Watson at the starting Z, Jaden Reed at the starting slot. I have Wicks at the backup X, but again, they're going to move him into the slot. They're going to move him and get him snaps, which they should. I have high hopes for Tay Wicks this season. He's going to start showing up on people's radars. I can almost guarantee that. At the Z, Malik Heath, backup Z, should I say, and the backup slot, I have Bo Melton. Packers wide receiver room is stacked, and it was probably their position of least need outside of maybe quarterback, right? And even though they drafted a quarterback, so probably their least position of need was wide receiver, and they didn't add one in the draft, and they didn't add one as an undrafted free agent. It was rumored that Julian Hicks was added as an undrafted free agent. That's not the case anymore, but he was invited to the tryouts, so he is still going to show up, right? But he's not on this depth chart because he's not officially signed. Then we have Grant DeBose at the backup X, Thyrick Pitts at the backup Z, and Samori Toure at the backup slot. I had such high hopes for Samori Toure. I loved his tape coming out of Nebraska. Such a crisp route runner, kind of did everything by the book, but it just didn't transfer to the NFL. He likely won't make the 53-man roster. I feel like the Packers will just roll with their 6 that they have and be like, we're good. They could even roll with 5 without Malik Heath, but I think they like him and what he brings as like a blocking receiver. So Samori Toure, if anything, will be like a practice squad guy. All right, so now moving on to offensive line, and I actually have 2 configurations of this. Right now, this first one, it's as it sits right now, what I think the depth chart would be right now, say if camp started right now, where players would line up with the ones. And that's Rasheed Walker at left tackle, number 1. Elton Jenkins at left guard, number 1. Josh Myers at center, number 1. I have Jordan Morgan at right guard, number 1. Now, he's so versatile, and I think maybe their long-term outlook on Jordan Morgan is at left tackle. But I think day one with the gaping hole that's at right guard, I feel like he would be right guard 1. As of right now, as the offensive line sits with Josh Myers at center. So that's where I listed him as. And then Zach Tom at right tackle 1. As for the backups, I have Andre Dillard at backup left tackle, but I think he might be better fit also inside at guard, so that could also change. Royce Newman at backup left guard, I could see him being cut soon, so just as of right now because he's on the roster. Jacob Monk at backup center, but I think he's also a better guard, so I just listed him as backup center because he kind of fits there right now. And Sean Ryan at backup right guard, and Caleb Jones backup right tackle. Third string, Luke Tenuta, left tackle. Donovan Jennings, third string left guard. I don't have a center there. Trent Jones, third string right guard. And Travis Glover, third string right tackle. And then Kadeem Telfort at fourth string right tackle. Now, as for the second configuration for offensive line is as follows. This is what I think it could end up being, say, maybe week 1 in the season or something of that sort after training camp, after things get meshed out and the offensive line, the best 5 are put out there. I think it might entail Jordan Morgan at left tackle, Elton Jenkins at left guard, Zach Tom at center, Josh Myers at right guard, and Rasheed Walker at right tackle. Josh Myers is still listed on the Packers roster as guard/center. Zach Tom is literally listed as an offensive lineman, and he's the only one listed as that. It's pretty much like, hey, you could just play wherever. But Josh Myers, there was, coming out of the draft, like, hey, he could play guard. And I think that would kind of be like a wake-up call for Josh Myers. And not that he was terrible last year. I think he gets more hate than he deserves. He was honestly better than Runyon and Ryan. I think he actually would be decent at right guard, probably better than Sean Ryan, maybe better than Jacob Monk. I'm very intrigued with Jacob Monk, but it might not be like a year 1 thing for him. So that could be like our week 1 starting offensive line, if we're being honest. Zach Tom, the rumors have been kept circling, and they mentioned that, they see him as a Hall of Fame center. Maybe they want to do that before Josh Myers is out of the building to see and give Josh Myers maybe one more shot at a different position at right guard. And if he blows it out of the water, hey, resign Josh Myers. There's your right guard. Now you have even more depth. Backups in this configuration, Andre Dillard, left tackle, but again, he might be better at guard. Sean Ryan, left guard. Josh Myers, backup center. Jacob Monk, backup right guard, and Caleb Jones, backup right tackle. All right, guys, so now let's go over the defensive depth chart. But before we do so, this is the last day to enter in this signed Lucas Van Ness Packers home jersey here. Thank you to Sleeper, who's sponsoring this video and sponsoring this giveaway. Sleeper is a fantasy sports app where you can choose higher or lower on a plethora of different stats from a multitude of different sports. Choose between 2 to 8 of your favorite players between different sports to make your picks and win up to 100x payouts. And right now on Sleeper, clicking the link down in the description, downloading the app, signing up, and using code BASS, B-A-S, to make your first deposit will get your deposit matched up to $500. So if you were to deposit $250, you'll then have $500 to play with, and doing so will also enter you in this giveaway for this signed Lucas Van Ness jersey, which ends today. So I'm going to announce the winner either tomorrow or the day after on the community tab on my YouTube. So if you haven't entered, go download Sleeper, make a first-time deposit with code BASS, enter in this giveaway. You don't want to miss out on it. All right, so now let's take a look at the defensive depth chart. And the Packers have moved to a 4-3, so it's going to look a little bit different in terms of we have a left end, we have a right end, and we have 2 defensive tackles rather than a nose tackle and a defensive tackle, right? So it's a little bit more easy to read sometimes because a lot of times there's a bunch of linebackers, and now it's just a lot of defensive linemen, right? It's kind of the flip side there. I'm going to start with defensive ends. Left end number 1, Preston Smith. Rashawn Gary, right end number 1. That's obvious. Lucas Van Ness, left end number 2. Kingsley Enagbare, right end number 2. Now, recent news came out that Enagbare didn't have a full tear of his ACL, which we all thought, and was like, okay, he's not going to be ready until November. It was actually a partial tear, which can take like 3 to 4 months to heal, so he might be ready for OTAs even. That's great news, and that's probably why the Packers didn't draft a single edge. I was under the impression they'd draft an edge, but that was also under the impression Enagbare wouldn't be ready to November, so that's really good news there. Left end number 3, Brenton Cox Jr. Right end number 3, Keyshawn Banks. Left end number 4, Kenneth Odumegwu. Right end number 4, Deslin Alexander. Left end number 5, Aaron Mosby. And right end number 5, DeAndre Johnson. Now, important to note here that Lucas Van Ness could also slide into defensive tackle in this 4-3 scheme, say on passing downs, which I think they might do, which I'm very intrigued to see. And speaking of defensive tackles, we have Kenny Clark at defensive tackle 1 with Devontae Wyatt. In terms of the second string, we have TJ Slayton and Carl Brooks. And the third string, Colby Wooden, Jonathan Ford. And the fourth string, they're 2 undrafted free agents they just signed, Rodney Matthews and James Esther. I have Brooks above Wooden. You guys know I'm a Brooks guy, and I think he takes an even farther jump in year 2 here. Really liked what I saw from his rookie campaign, but that doesn't mean I didn't like what I saw from Colby Wooden. It's just the Packers were already giving Carl Brooks more snaps last season, so he projects above him on the depth chart. Moving to linebackers, this also switches up a bit. Last year, it's kind of just linebacker 1, linebacker 2, right? You're at a 3-4. You have 2 inside linebackers. It doesn't really matter too much. Now we have a weak side linebacker, we have a Mike linebacker, and then we have a strong side linebacker. So weak side, I think it's going to be Edgerrin Cooper. That's what I projected him as before the Packers even drafted him. And if the Packers had drafted him, I thought he'd still be a weak side linebacker. And that's what I think he's going to be great at. So I have him there at weak side. I have Quay as the Mike. This one's kind of difficult, but I don't think Isaiah McDuffie is going to be the Mike. I think it's going to be Quay. I think the Packers are going to be comfortable giving him that green dot, and I think he could play the Mike. So I have Quay as Mike, and then as for the strong side backer, I do have Isaiah McDuffie. I think our first three starting linebackers, if they're in a base 4-3, is Cooper, Walker, and McDuffie. As for backups, I have Eric Wilson as the backup will linebacker. I have Tyron Hopper as the backup Mike. I think he projects to a Mike in the NFL, Tyron Hopper. And then for the Sam, I have Christian Welch as the second string there. And then I also have Christian Young as a backup weak side, and Raylan Goforth as a fourth string weak side. Goforth, an undrafted free agent they just signed out of Washington. I also added another position, and that is box safety, because the Packers, likely will be running some one deep safety with Xavier McKinney back there. So who's going to be the box safety in that role? I think starting would be Ketan Oladapo over Evan Williams. I think Ketan Oladapo is more pro-ready right now for that role, both of which have a ton of experience. Evan Williams has a ton of experience, but only 1 year at Oregon, 4, I believe, at Fresno State. I think Ketan Oladapo, if the season were to start right now, this guy would be able to get plugged into that spot before Evan Williams. But I do like both of them in that role, so I have them as 1 and number 2. Free safety, we have, of course, Xavier McKinney. So excited for him in this defense. I think he could play, honestly, any spot. Free safety, strong safety, box safety, slot, honestly, anywhere. Strong safety number 1, I have Javon Bullard. I think that's where he's going to start in terms of year 1. Right off the bat, it's going to be Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney back at deep safety if they're in a 2-deep look. Now, Javon Bullard could also kind of play the box. He could play the slot, which I'll show you. I have him at second string in the slot as well. As for backup safeties, I have Anthony Johnson Jr. as a backup free safety, Evan Williams as the backup strong safety, Benny Sapp third string free safety, Ketan Oladapo third string strong safety, Tyler Coyle fourth string free safety, Zane Anderson fourth string strong safety. Now, as for cornerbacks, I have it listed as left side cornerback, right side cornerback, and slot cornerback. On the left side, starting, I have Carrington Valentine over Eric Stokes. I feel like that's how it would be right now. I think Eric Stokes would kind of have to earn that starting job back, but he's good depth to have if he is healthy. Jair starting right side cornerback, and Keyshawn Nixon starting in the slot. Now, Nixon is like the only non-first or second rounder starting on this defense outside of Isaiah McDuffie, if you consider, a base package. But if you're looking at nickel, Isaiah McDuffie would be off the field anyways, and Keyshawn Nixon would be on, and he's like the only non-first or second rounder in this starting lineup, which is pretty crazy. And the Packers just paid him a lot of money, so he'll likely start at slot cornerback until he doesn't produce. And I think it might be a pretty short leash, because I think Javon Bullard projects as a slot cornerback like wonderfully in this defense. 2 years ago at Georgia, he was their slot cornerback and was listed as a cornerback. Then he moved to safety last year. Tyke Smith played slot, but I think he could play anywhere. But I think he's best fit the NFL level in the slot. So I have him as the second string slot, but this could change. But moving forward, like say future 2025, I would say it's almost a guarantee Javon Bullard is playing slot by that point. And then Kalen King, I have third string. I think he could be a good slot cornerback at the NFL level. He could play outside, but I think he might be better fit at the slot at the NFL level. Then for backup left cornerback and right cornerback, we have Eric Stokes and Corey Ballantyne. Third string, Robert Rochelle, Anthony Johnson. Not to be confused with Anthony Johnson Jr., the safety. This is the other Anthony Johnson Jr. from Virginia, not Iowa State. I know it's weird. The Packers have both of them, right? Then for the fourth string cornerbacks left and right, we have Zion Gilbert and then also Jamon Green. To wrap things up, as for special teams at kicker, I think Anders Carlson, it's his job to lose. It's going to be a short leash in my opinion, but I still think it's his job to lose. And if I were to bet right now which guy is our kicker week 1, it's probably going to be Anders. I think the Packers believe in him and they're going to, allow him to prove himself. Now, but Greg Joseph's right behind him. And although he kind of kicked the same as Anders last year, not that great, competition's good. So whatever one comes out as the victor, that'll help the team, right? Then we have Jack Podlesny as the third kicker, likely not going to make the roster. But hey, this could be a 3-man kicking rotation and see which one is the best. That's the beauty of competition there. Then we have Daniel Whelan at punter. There's no backup because we don't have one. They're trying out a kicker and punter, the punter from Duke, and I believe the kicker from Buffalo. So those guys will maybe be signed to the roster, or at least the punter from Duke, to kind of just give a little bit of competition to Whelan. Then for long snapper, I have Matt Orzak as one because I think it's going to be his job to lose, which I don't want. Like, Peter Bowden from Wisconsin, they're one of their undrafted free agents they just signed. I think will end up our long snapper. I think he's a lot better. Matt Orzak was a disappointment, to say the least, last year as a street free agent. I think a lot of the kicking issues could also be stemmed back to him. So although he's one right now, it's very, 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 very close, and I think Peter Bowden does end up as our long snapper. So that does it for my first predictive Green Bay Packers depth chart in April of 2024. So we're going to release a few more of these as the offseason goes on, as well as 53-man roster predictions. I'll probably do a 53-man roster prediction maybe after OTAs, just to kind of wait a little bit so we can kind of get some type of substance to say, hey, this is why this guy's not going to make the roster. Not just right now where we have really no idea. I mean, we know which guys are roster locks, but outside of that, you're kind of like, okay, you got to kind of wait and see. But this is my predictive depth chart. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are there any you don't agree with? Which ones do you agree with? Let me know in the comments below. But I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.